news came out of the SEC basketball schedule for the 2023-2024 season. The way the SEC schedule works is you play, and we don't know how this is going to work when Texas and Oklahoma are added, but you play 18 conference games. You play all 13 teams once. You have, that would be 3 opponents that you play twice on a rotate every year, which gets you to 16 games. And I believe Tennessee's are South Carolina, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt. Those are the annual ones. And then you have, on a rotating basis, 2 other teams you do a home and home with. Not going to lie to you guys, Tennessee got a brutal draw with the SEC basketball schedule this year. Their other 2 home and homes are Texas A&M and Vanderbilt. Texas A&M and Alabama. Alabama, whatever you think of them as a program, is still rolling under NATO's. Brandon Miller may be gone. They're going to be back. They're going to be fine next year. Texas A&M is a program on the rise under Buzz Williams to the NCAA tournament. Both teams are preseason top 25 teams this early out next year. So Tennessee, and we know what Kentucky can do. We know how dangerous Kentucky is. So Tennessee, 3 of their 5 home and homes next year are going to be preseason top 25 teams. Their schedule's already pretty loaded for non-conference play, which Rick Barnes always does. And I'm just going to pull up the way too early top 25 for you right now because ESPN tracks these weekly. This is probably the best source you can get. To their credit, Tennessee is at number 6. So Tennessee is actually higher ranked than any of these teams we're talking about right now. But other SEC teams are Arkansas at number 14, Alabama at number 18, Texas A&M at number 19. So those are the most notable teams right now. Now, really standing out is the fact that Kentucky is not in the top 25 in this way too early top 25, but Kentucky is Kentucky. You still have to believe they're going to be a big threat. And Kentucky, Florida, and Auburn are all next in line. Now, the break for Tennessee is that the SEC does seem like it's going to be a little bit less loaded this year than it was last year. So I don't think Tennessee is going to complain about this too much. However, it's still not desirable. A couple other breaks they get from the schedule. So their home games include Alabama, which you have to play twice, Auburn, Florida, Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Texas A&M, and Vanderbilt. Now pay attention to 2 teams I named in that list right there, which would be Auburn and Florida. Those are 2 of the tough teams in the SEC this year. Neither is in the way too early top 25, but they're fringe. They are, if you go to the site, they are just missing it, and they're next in line. So Tennessee getting both of them at home is a pretty good draw. That's something you want if you're Tennessee. However, on the other end, they've got to visit Arkansas, which is the other top 25 SEC team in the way too early rankings. So that's something you don't really want to deal with if you're Tennessee basketball. However, go to the message boards. Travis, you're right. In order to be the man, you got to beat the man. Bring him on. And quite honestly, I've always been a proponent. I'm not this way in football. I don't think this way in football. But in college basketball, the harder the schedule, the better. You want the hardest, toughest schedule possible. Now, this wasn't the case this was more the case back in the day with the RPI, which 75% of the RPI, if you guys don't remember, was schedule strength. It was actually ridiculous. The BPI is a little more fair. They just rank quality wins, road versus home. You actually have to beat some teams and not just play them, but the more you play, the more likely you are to beat some teams. And so college basketball rewards schedule strength more than any other sport, as it should. So when the NCAA tournament comes around, it gives you the strongest case for a solid seed, and it also prepares you relatively well. And Rick Barnes has done a great job preparing for Tennessee basketball. He always does when it comes to non-conference play, and now Tennessee has a pretty rough draw of conference play relative to the SEC. As we're talking about having some issues this year, it's not going to be, at least based on preseason rankings, it's not going to be as deep. Other teams Tennessee plays, they've got non-conference play against NC State for the Hall of Fame game in San Antonio on Saturday, December the 16th. They host Illinois on Saturday, December the 9th. And they have a visit to Wisconsin on Friday, November the 10th, which I believe is going to be their opener. Now, that's going to be an intriguing game. Plus, they've got the Maui Invitational on November 20th, 21st, and 22nd. That's a Monday through Wednesday. So Tennessee's going to have their fair share of tough college basketball games. But I will say this is a bit of a rough draw based on the two teams that they got, which is, again, Texas A&M and Alabama. Kentucky, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt get every year. You might actually get a break this year with Kentucky, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt, because I would say that Kentucky, again, a lot of people are questioning if they are a top 25 caliber team. This may be one of those random rebuilding years by Calipari. We don't know yet, but typically that's like being stuck with Alabama when you're stuck with them. So you never know. Now, South Carolina, on the other hand, they went 11-21 last year under Lamont Paris, but that was his first year. He did take Chattanooga to the NCAA tournament in 2021-22. Based on what he did at Chattanooga, if that were to translate to South Carolina, though, he had 2 losing seasons at Chattanooga before he really took things off. So it's probably still another rebuilding year for South Carolina. As far as the other team that they play twice, it's Vanderbilt's Jerry Stackhouse. And we know Vanderbilt under Jerry Stackhouse is hot and cold. I mean, particularly last year, Stackhouse was left for dead, and Vanderbilt finished very, very, very strong. It was their second straight year in the NIT quarterfinals. They could turn a corner this year, but at some point they have to stop stumbling out of the gate early in the season. Stackhouse, what's happening with him reminds me of Quanzo Martin at Tennessee back there in the day when Tennessee would always finish strong, if you guys remember the Quanzo Martin years, but they would start off really, really, really slow. So they were playing catch-up to get to the NCAA tournament, which is why they missed it the first 2 years. They missed it in 2011, 2012, despite finishing second in the SEC. Then they missed it again in 2012 to 13. Finally got in just barely in 2013, 2014, but they always finished strong, so they got to the Sweet 16. So for Tennessee Vanderbilt, it depends on the dates on when they're going to play Vanderbilt. Because if what Jerry Stackhouse has done is any indication, it seems like Vanderbilt's going to be a team that starts slow and starts to finish strong towards the end. Although that was just last year, to be fair. That didn't happen in 2021, 2022. What happened in 2021, 2022 was they actually just they were slogging out the whole regular season and then just turned it on in tournament play in the SEC tournament and then in the NIT. But we don't know for sure if that's going to happen this year with Vanderbilt and Jerry Stackhouse. So again, the real story is Texas A&M and Alabama. Those were 2 brutal draws for your 2 road games. For your 2 home and homes. And then the only way it could have been tougher is it was made tougher because the other team that is going to be one of the toughest teams in the SEC, not named Tennessee, is Arkansas, and Tennessee has to play Arkansas on the road. So in terms of the randomness, Tennessee gets a brutal, brutal, brutal draw. I don't think Kentucky's going to stay out of the top 25, though. So quite honestly, that also is a brutal draw. Travis says this year Tennessee will be terrific going into the tournament. I agree. I think Tennessee should be in great shape. Now, the question is if Rick Barnes can actually not lose to a lower seed for once in the tournament. Rick Barnes has lost to a lower seed every single year at Tennessee in the NCAA tournament. And there is that issue that he grinds people. I think personally Rick Barnes is changing his approach a bit. I'm seeing that with what he's doing with the transfer portal, willingness to spread the floor more, to shoot more. And I think Tennessee fans should be excited about that. Mr. Jones says hopefully Ziegler is back to form when he comes back. Zakai Ziegler. Well, Mr. Jones, I will say this. He's going to get tested pretty quickly because Tennessee's got a brutal schedule starting out, as I just mentioned. But perhaps that's what they need. That's what he needs to get into a rhythm to kind of get used to playing the competition he's going to have to face. So I think largely Zakai Ziegler and Tennessee will be fine. I think there will be more growing pains with this Rick Barnes team than there will in the past. It's huge that Josiah Jordan-James, Santiago Vescovi, and Ziegler are all back. Honestly, you're not that upset that your bigs are gone, with the exception of Jonas Adu. Uras Plavcic was oftentimes a liability. A lot of the reason when he was successful was because he's let him be successful because they didn't think he was good enough to draw people away from the perimeter. Olivier Kamwa did have that great game when Duke jumped to a zone in the NCAA tournament and started hitting every shot from the free throw line. But just the style of play that takes you far in the tournament now, given how Tennessee's constructed, Kamwa's not going to fit, particularly with Jonas Adu developing. Chris Ledlam coming in also kind of wasn't going to make room for that. So I think the big thing is Tennessee's going more for scores now on the perimeter. They added Jordan Gainey, Dalton Knecht, two sharpshooters from USC Upstate and Northern Colorado. Freddie DeLeon, watch out. That's the big one. Freddie DeLeon the fifth. I think he could be a superstar in the making. There's still DJ Jefferson, Jemai Mashak as a defensive specialist, and Jonas Adu and Toby Awaka. That's enough for your post game. Plus, Josiah Jordan James can move to the post, and there's JP Estrella and Kate Phillips. So I think as far as basketball goes, Tennessee is constructed pretty well. Again, the schedule is the big question. We know they got two brutal draws with Texas A&M and with Alabama. And we also know Arkansas on the road makes it even tougher. Things overall, though, again, the SEC being down can help them. But at the same time, maybe that's why you want the brutal draw if you're Tennessee. The SEC being down, you probably need to play tougher teams to help you up your schedule. That's something that Bruce Pearl did when he first took over at Tennessee in 2005. For those who don't remember, the SEC was really down during that time. It was forgotten about because in 2006, Florida won the national title and LSU reached the Final Four. But during the regular season of that year, people found the SEC to be very mediocre. But Pearl had scheduled Memphis, he had scheduled Oklahoma State, he had scheduled Texas with Rick Barnes, ironically. So it really helped Tennessee, and they got the number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament that year. That's probably going to be the situation Rick Barnes and company are in this year but it's going to be better because they actually do get to go to a tournament going to Maui, and they get Wisconsin, and they get NC State. So they get enough teams that's going to beef up their resume. The SEC is very much in flux. You know, it's funny. Back in 2016, 2017, I kind of thought the SEC was a mark of stability with very solid coaches at every program. And, I mean, that was when you had Ben Howland at Mississippi State, Quanzo Martin at Missouri, obviously Calipari at Kentucky. You had solid coaches, exception of Calipari, that weren't superstar coaches, Frank Martin in South Carolina, but that could get the job done. I think with this new NIL age and with this new amount of money that's coming in, though, I think that many SEC programs are shooting a lot higher than just having a solid basketball program. And you're seeing that a lot more. And I think a lot of them just decided that maybe 2 years ago. And that's probably has a lot to do with why the league will be in flux this year, because there's still a lot of rebuilding going on. So that's intriguing to pay attention to when it comes to the SEC. Mr. Jones, you asked who replaced Julian Phillips and Olivier Nkamhoua. Nobody. They're going to change their offense. Jonas Adu is going to be really the only true post player. If you look at the starting lineup, my prediction is that Jonas Adu plays in the post. And then he runs 4 perimeter guys. Zakai Ziegler, Josiah Jordan James, Santiago Vescovi. And I'm going to say Freddie DeLeon. Now, of those 4, James would be if you need a second guy in the post, James can switch down. But that's what I think they're going to do more than anything else. I think Rick Barnes is going to play a little bit of small ball.